Hey guys, welcome back. It's been a while. I'm your host, Sherry. I missed you all a lot. I think I'm ready to start on the microphone again. It's been a weird couple of months and I've been going through a lot of emotions. I'm getting better though. I learned a new way to manage my grief and it's helping a lot. I say manage because it will never go away. I can't move on from it. So I have to learn to live with it and just carry it with me. It's like having an extra limb or something. When you look at me, you'll be able to see it, but I'm learning how to get back into a normal life again. I don't spend every day hoping to die anymore. I hit some pretty dark places, but now I feel revived in some ways. But as always, the pain is still very real, and every day that passes without Michael is extremely hard. But for now, I'm back as long as I can, and I hope you enjoy this story. We downloaded this Vice app on our TV recently, and I stumbled across this crazy looking documentary that had Satan and black metal vibes, and I was intrigued. I love black metal music, in case you didn't know. So I put it on and I watched it for 10 to 15 minutes. I was like, holy shit, I have to cover this case. I turned it off so I wouldn't be influenced by it, and I went down a rabbit hole investigating this guy. I listened to a podcast about this case, and I wish I could remember his name because it was a relatively small podcast, and I'd love to plug his channel, but I can't remember who it was. This story is pretty crazy and takes place in North Carolina. This is the case of Pazuzu Algarad. Pazuzu Algarad was born John Lawson in 1978 in California. When he was a grown-up, he changed his name to Pazuzu, which is what I'll refer to him as for the rest of the story. No matter how much of a piece of shit someone is, I wouldn't refer to them by their dead name because that's like a real shitty thing to do. So he's Pazuzu. His parents, Cynthia and Tim, were married in 1971, and he was their only child. They packed up and moved with their son to Raleigh, North Carolina. His parents divorced in 1990 when Pazuzu was 12. His dad moved back to California, and that's the last we'll hear of his dad for the rest of the story. And Pazuzu and his mom stayed in North Carolina. They lived in a house at 2749 Nob Hill Road, which is the house you see on your screen on the right-hand side. Pretty much everything I talk about today takes place inside this house. I saw some pictures of Pazuzu when he was a child and when he was in high school. He was an adorable kid with real blonde hair. He looked like an average kid with a nice smile and nothing that would make you think he would go on to do some of the things that he did. Pazuzu had a lot of issues though, and we'll get into that. So Pazuzu liked watching horror movies from a real young age. That's not super outlandish, but I just thought I'd point it out. He doesn't have a lot of friends. He's failing in school. He would tell other kids that he had magic powers, such as being able to control the weather. He told other kids he worshiped Satan, and this was a real Bible-loving, heavy religion town, so it was hard for him to make friends when he does all this weird stuff. His classmates say he loved any kind of attention he was getting from telling people these crazy things, even the bad attention. He was lapping it up. Pazuzu had several mental illnesses and was diagnosed with schizophrenia and agoraphobia. There wasn't much for mental health services in the 80s and 90s while he's growing up in this little town in North Carolina. Nowadays, the resources are much better and there's crisis counselors in school and teachers are better trained to handle kids with mental illness. His mother did put him in a treatment program, but she got to a point where she couldn't afford it any longer. She was paying a lot of money out of pocket, and unfortunately, that's the reality for a lot of folks who want therapy and counseling. Pazuzu is obsessed with horror and gore and Satan. And just to jump off topic for a moment, when he changed his name to Pazuzu, he cited on the forum that it was for religious reasons. Pazuzu is the king of the demons of the wind, meaning one who controls the weather. If you've ever seen the 1973 movie The Exorcist, which is one of my favorite movies, the name of the demon that possesses Reagan is Pazuzu. That's the backstory on his name change. Now, Pazuzu is in high school. I read a thread where some of his classmates said he was bullied really bad. This is a heavily Christian area, and this kid is considered an outcast who goes around proclaiming his love for Satan. He fails ninth grade for a second time, and then he drops out. He started using drugs, but his main vice was his drinking. So he's 16 years old and going through a 12-pack of beer a day. I don't know anyone that age who would be able to drink 3 beers a day, let alone 12. He's using drugs and alcohol as a way to deal with his mental illness. He had agoraphobia, so he doesn't really leave the house. This makes me wonder if his mom was supplying the alcohol for him. I mean, he could be stealing her stash, but you'd think she would notice if 12 beers a day are going missing. Pazuzu has lots of run-ins with the law and arrests such as larceny and another arrest for hitting his mother. The thing is, though, he's always gotten away with it, such as getting a probation or a fine or whatever. He's managed to slip through every crack he could find, and I don't blame him for that. I blame the court system in North Carolina. In my opinion, Pazuzu needed inpatient mental health treatment, which again, his mother couldn't afford any longer. There's so many things wrong here. His mother said she knows he's not an angel and even referred to him as her little warrior, but she says he's not a bad person. His mother was known to spoil him a lot and turn a blind eye to a lot of the things that he did. She loved her son and she felt bad for him. Pazuzu claims he is a Satanist and also converted to Muslim. If you know anything about religion, you would know that these two religions completely contradict each other. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with either religion. Whatever you choose to worship is your business. I'm just pointing out that it's impossible to be both a Muslim and a Satanist. He would wear a pentagram and a turban, which is just strange. Pazuzu invented his own religion that merged the two religions together. Now, one thing that could have caused this was Pazuzu started this right after 9/11. Do you guys remember back to the early 2000s when people viewed Muslims as super scary? He likely saw that and took from that and merged it with another religion that people were afraid of, such as Satanism. The Church of Satan later came out and said Pazuzu was not one of them. They denounced everything he stood for. In fact, the Church of Satan nowadays isn't even really a religion, but more of a political party. They don't even believe that the devil is a real person or an entity. They see Satan as a model of behavior instead. Basically, they think the idea of God and Satan being a form of something is outdated, as well as the concept of heaven and hell. Pazuzu stays home while his mom works 2 jobs. He's a drug dealer, and you could basically get anything you wanted from him. He ends up turning their house into a party house. You guys, I cannot even begin to tell you the things that went on in this house. He welcomed misfits and outcasts and anyone who wanted to party. Everyone who would come over said there were no rules, and you were allowed to stay as long as you wanted. If you wanted to draw on the wall, go right ahead. If you wanted to punch the person next to you, you were free to do whatever you want. Pazuzu is seen as this force, a very spiritual person who could make you do whatever he wanted. He occasionally came out of the house to the porch or the yard wearing a purple robe of some sort, not like a bathrobe, but like a cloak kind of thing. There were animal sacrifices going on inside as his weekly sacrifice to Satan. The house looked like something out of the show Hoarders. There's rotting feces everywhere because people just basically shit wherever they wanted. If you had to use the bathroom, you just went wherever you could find a spot. Pazuzu was killing animals and then drinking their blood. This is crazy because this is his mother's house. She didn't care what went on as long as it happened outside of her bedroom and didn't interfere with her going to work. I also think she had a fear of Pazuzu. So she may not have had much choice but to deal with it. The house was fucking disgusting, though. People say when they came over for the first time, the smell will almost knock you out. The house appears normal on the outside. There's a handwritten sign on the door that reads, "No gang members allowed. Anyone that dresses the same, has the same badge, and calls themselves calls themselves the authority of the land they did not create. It also welcomes any Native Americans since this was their land to begin with. Under that are the words, "Evil will triumph." Throughout the house, there's Arabic words spray painted all over the walls. An Arabic speaker reviewed the markings and said it was a poorly written Arabic writer, and it basically just said, "House of the devil worship and Satan lives here." I'm going to post a link in the description to a body cam video a police officer took going into the house. I suggest you watch it when you get the chance. The first minute or two, you'll think, okay, this house is pretty filthy. But as it goes on, it keeps getting worse and worse. You can't even walk down the hall without stepping on all kinds of trash. There's trash piled up everywhere, animal feces, human feces, mold. It's just terrible. I think the kitchen appeared the most normal, and it was disgusting too. Again, it looks like something out of Hoarders. People would come in and ask what that smell was, and Pazuzu would just say things like, "Oh, it's just the bodies decaying in the basement." They usually just shrugged it off and thought it was just Pazuzu exaggerating or showing off. There's people coming over and sacrificing animals and worshiping Satan. People are having orgies all over this house on top of piles of garbage. This place just sounds like something out of a nightmare. Pazuzu also encouraged people to just be naked, piss wherever you want, have sex with whoever you want, or whatever you want. These people, like him, were suffering from mental illness. They're heroin addicts and poor people who aren't accepted by society. I wish they could have gotten the help they needed so badly. I'm also not telling the story to sensationalize or exploit anyone's mental illness, not even Pazuzu. I'm just giving you guys the story. Ultimately, Pazuzu did some really terrible crimes, and we'll get into that in a bit. Pazuzu had a lot of tattoos and piercings. Again, nothing wrong with that. I have tattoos. My son had 14 piercings, and half of them were in his face. But for Pazuzu, these were all done in his house using God knows what in extremely unsanitary conditions. His tongue was split like a snake, and one night he was high on meth. He decided to file his teeth down to points. I truly can't imagine just sitting there filing down my teeth. Try to think of that for a moment. It sounds like torture. His girlfriend Amber had her teeth filed down to points as well. And graphic warning here. They said it helped when sacrificing animals because it was easier to sink their teeth into and drink the blood. There's also stories of Pazuzu having each guest spit into a cup, and then Pazuzu would drink it once everyone was done. That sounds wonderful nowadays with COVID, huh? All these things happened in Pazuzu's house. Remember, he has agoraphobia. He would very rarely leave the house. Pazuzu had a lot of ladies that flocked to him. He slept with most of them, which is icky considering he only bathed once a year and had no hygiene tasks like brushing his teeth or cleaning his dreadlocks. I think he liked the attention he got from everyone and he wanted to feel loved, but he had two main girlfriends. One's name was Amber Birch and the other's name was Crystal Matlock. They were known to have sex in each other's blood and a lot of other crazy stuff. I read a thread where a woman ran into Amber at the grocery store and said she reeked of cat piss really bad and her dreads had bugs in them. This just gives you a visual idea of Amber. She's actually the girl who's in the photo. If you look into the middle of your screen, you'll see her. Now, Amber was in her early 20s, so Pazuzu was about 10 years older than her. I found Amber's Facebook page. I found Pazuzu's as well. Amber seemed like she was a typical girl before. She's tagged in photos with her sisters and her mom. There's things about Satan and some corny, dry memes. She seemed pretty normal to me, and she seemed educated and philosophical in some of her stuff. There were even some comments from Pazuzu, and they were all typed in Arabic. The thing that bothered me is there's a lot of photos of her at their house, and she has their dogs in pictures, and I'm just wondering what these dogs went through with all the animal sacrificing going on. You can see the filth in the background and so on. It's strange because she's like, it's Fido's birthday. Everybody wish him a happy birthday. And she seemed like a good animal person. She also made a post about one of her dogs in the house having a tumor or a cyst, and they had to take him to the vet. So that's either a lie or maybe they liked some animals and not others. I have no idea. What really got me was a photo that she had posted of her cat that said he was missing, and she seemed really upset and asked if anyone could find him to return him. It makes me wonder if Pazuzu did something to the cat. Bottom line is that just judging from her Facebook posts, I wouldn't believe she was living in a feces-ridden drug and sex house that performed weekly satanic rituals. In October of 2010, Pazuzu was arrested in connection with the death of a man named Joseph Chandler. Joseph was out on a boat ramp on this night. He was shot by one of Pazuzu's followers. Pazuzu was there when it happened. Pazuzu was charged with misleading investigators and allowing this person to stay at his house while this manhunt for a shooter was taking place. So Pazuzu didn't fire the gun, but he was there and he didn't stop him, and he also let the shooter stay at his house afterwards. I don't believe that Pazuzu knew Joseph. I think he was just at the wrong place at the wrong time. The night he was killed was a full moon, which is when Pazuzu was known to do his sacrifices, although it was always animals. At least we thought it was always animals. The charge he received was accessory after the fact of involuntary manslaughter. He received probation for his role in it. Pazuzu's mom meets a man and marries him. She moves into her new husband's house. I can see this guy being like, yeah, I'm not staying here with your crazy satanic son. But Cynthia would still come by the house and check on Pazuzu and drop off groceries or whatever. Remember, it's still her house. She's just moved out. In September of 2011, Pazuzu's girlfriend, Amber, was arrested for slapping and choking Cynthia during one of her visits to the house. Amber was given 12 months probation. Pazuzu was also arrested in a separate incident for choking his mom. The police came and Cynthia told them that she was terrified of her son, but she didn't want to press charges. She said he's a good person at heart and he just has a lot of mental issues. Pazuzu has this one friend whose name is Matt Flowers. Now, Matt is a Iraqi Special Forces war veteran, and he's back in the States now, and he's hanging out with Pazuzu. He's known him since he was 17. Pazuzu is 10 years older than Matt. Matt does drugs with Pazuzu a lot, and he has a firsthand look at what goes on in this house. They become pretty good friends, and Matt said he hung out with Pazuzu every day for a year and a half. Pazuzu brags to Matt that he's killed people and buried them in his backyard. Matt, like a lot of other people, believes Pazuzu is lying or exaggerating and just saying these things for attention. Matt had known Pazuzu for about 8 years and said he watched his friend turn into a complete monster. Matt is level-headed, though. He's not super strung out like a lot of the other people are who hang out in this house. Again, the guy was a Special Forces Iraqi war veteran. He's seen some shit. He said one night Pazuzu was talking, and he said if he was ever caught for all the horrible things he's done, he would kill himself if he ended up in jail and couldn't do his rituals each month on the dark moon. Matt is starting to think maybe this guy is telling the truth. Maybe he's not making up all these crazy stories about killing people. Perhaps I'm really sitting here talking to a serial killer. All this time, he thought these crazy stories were just drug and alcohol-fueled madness and lies. Matt said there would be 40 people in the house, and they would push Pazuzu to do crazy things, and he would just do it, whether it's walk up and smash the TV or break a bottle over his head. Pazuzu liked being the center of attention and entertaining people, and he had an act that he had to keep up with. Matt also said Pazuzu had a way of getting into your head. One night, Pazuzu drugged Matt. He shot him up with a massive dose of LSD and then did the same thing to himself. Matt tried to check himself into a psychiatric facility because that night had him messed up for weeks. So Pazuzu is constantly questioning Matt and quizzing him about his time overseas and asking him about killing people. Anyone knows you don't go asking soldiers about that kind of stuff, but Pazuzu was intrigued. Matt noted his weird friend he used to hang out with 2 years before had turned into a complete monster. He and Amber would sacrifice animals and preach utter nonsense in his home in front of all these other people. When he sacrificed the animals, he would always go into another room and come out with his face covered in their blood and exhibiting signs that he was more powerful. He didn't do the animal killings in front of everyone. Matt said most of the time it was rabbits, and he had no idea where he was getting all these rabbits from. Matt tells the story of one guy at the house begging Pazuzu to smash his hand with a hammer so he could get prescription pain pills. Pazuzu instead, sorry, I got something in my throat. So Matt tells the story of this guy, and he's begging Pazuzu to smash his hand with a hammer so he could get prescription pain pills. Pazuzu instead cut the guy's finger off, and they never heard from him again. What really did it for Matt was one night Pazuzu was drunk and talking to him and told him that any female that Matt brought into the house, I will rape. As if that wasn't bad enough, next he would cross a line that Matt said was unforgivable. Pazuzu bragged about raping a soldier. Now, we don't know if that was true, that he really did that, or if he wanted to say something that he knew would provoke a reaction out of Matt. Matt says it was at that moment Pazuzu became his enemy. Matt's like, you know what? I'm not like all these other fuckers that follow you. I'm a fucking Special Forces Army veteran. Matt grabbed Pazuzu by his dreadlocks and ran his head into a cabinet. Then he continued beating him. Pazuzu laid on the ground while Matt stomped his head with his boot. Afterwards, Pazuzu looked at him and said, "That's why I love you, brother." Matt places an anonymous call to police and says there are bodies buried in the backyard of 2749 Nob Hill Drive. The police show up on the tip and they knock on the door. Pazuzu answers and tells them, "No, there's no bodies in my backyard." And the police leave. Unbelievable. Matt phones again and says, "Look, you guys, there's really bodies buried in the backyard. The dude brags about it all the time. You need to go check this out." On October 5th, 2014, police arrive with a search warrant. The police uncover 2 bodies in the backyard that belong to 2 men who have been missing since 2009. They've been buried there for 5 years. Pazuzu and Amber were each charged with 1 count of murder and 1 count of accessory after the fact to murder. Pazuzu's other girlfriend, Crystal, was charged with helping bury one of the bodies. Pazuzu killed one of the men, and Amber helped bury the body. Amber killed the other man, and Pazuzu helped bury the body. These were 2 separate incidents. They didn't take place on the same day. The autopsies revealed both men died from gunshot wounds. They were kidnapped, and both men were kept for days in the basement alive before they were killed. I don't know if they were abused, but it seems that Pazuzu and Amber only wanted them for one thing, and that was a sacrificial killing. It's likely they were just chained up until it was time for the killing. This is pure speculation, though. I can't find anything that says what they experienced during their time in the basement. Again, Pazuzu's ammo was that he needed something to sacrifice. I'm going to get into a little bit about the 2 victims. From what I can gather, these were not 2 friends of Pazuzu. Both men didn't know each other. Again, these are separate incidents. They were both described as drifters and likely were approached by Amber or one of the women like, "Hey, there's this party at my house. There's drugs and alcohol and music. Why don't you come hang out for a while?" Victim number 1 is Joshua Wetzler. Joshua was reported missing in 2009. Josh was described as a peace-loving hippie who loved the Grateful Dead and music festivals and horses. He got into some trouble when he was arrested for purchasing psychedelic mushrooms and they were shipped to him. Because it was through the U.S. Postal Service, he was given a felony on his record. He found it hard to get jobs and was just kind of drifting around. At the time of his death, he had a 4-year-old son. His autopsy revealed he died from 3 gunshot wounds to the head and 4 gunshot wounds to the torso. Victim number 2 is Tommy Welch. There isn't really a lot of information out there about this guy. I tried to find anything I could, but there's really nothing there. Tommy enjoyed electronics and fixing car stereos. His favorite artist was Michael Jackson. He had plans to meet up with his brother later that night and eat pizza with his brother's family, but he never showed up. Tommy died from one gunshot wound to the back of his head. There may have been other victims. Pazuzu bragged about killing 2 sex workers whose bodies have never been found. Pazuzu and Amber at this point are in jail and awaiting their trial. Pazuzu is evaluated and found to have multiple mental illnesses as well as suffering from hepatitis C. I read the full report on him, and he was noted as shaking all the time and not able to sit still. This is likely withdrawals from drugs and alcohol. In January of 2015, Pazuzu's mother, Cynthia, is informed by the Forsyth County Health Department that she had to make the necessary repairs to the home to make it habitable, or else it would be demolished. It would cost $79,000 to make this home livable. She doesn't have that kind of money, so the house is scheduled to be demolished. 2 months later, Wells Fargo, who is the mortgage company, proceeded with their plans to demolish the home at 2749 Nob Hill Road. This was a house of horrors, and neighbors were glad to see it gone. One of the next-door neighbors ended up buying the property. I looked up the house on Google Maps, and you can see the next-door neighbor's house with an open plot of land next to it, where Pazuzu's house once was. It's a beautiful area, too. All the houses look well kept, and it's a shame that Pazuzu's house was once beautiful back in the day, long before he grew up. In May of 2015, Pazuzu was transferred from the Forsyth County Jail to Central Prison in Raleigh, so he's going to the big prison. It was the second time he had been transferred for safekeeping since his arrest 7 months earlier. A transfer for safekeeping can be for 3 reasons: security, mental health disorders, or medical conditions. We don't know the reason why Pazuzu was moved. But in the early morning hours of October 28, 2015, Pazuzu was found dead in his prison cell. He was 36 years old. He died from severe blood loss caused by a deep wound to a major blood vessel in his left arm. It was ruled a suicide. You guys want to know what was crazy? They never found the instrument that was used to slice his blood vessel. It's been noted he likely used his sharpened teeth to slice his wrist. Remember, he was high on meth and filed his teeth into points. Pazuzu would never get his day in court and receive a sentence for the 2 murders. Amber Birch received a minimum of 30 years for killing Tommy Welch with a 22-gauge caliber rifle. This was the same rifle Pazuzu used to kill Joshua Wetzler. Crystal Maddock received 3 years for her role in helping bury Joshua Wetzler. She is free today in 2021. Pazuzu took his life on the full moon just like he always said he would. I read one thread that said, and I can't verify if this is true, but the night before he committed suicide, his mother called the jail and asked if they could give him a small rat or something because he had to make a sacrifice due to the upcoming full moon. His mom told the jail if he didn't, he would sacrifice himself instead. I truly believe Pazuzu had a hard childhood. He witnessed his mother having sex with multiple bikers when he walked into her bedroom when he was 6 years old. He was also watching horror movies at 5 and 6 years old. Now, I love horror movies and everyone knows that, but exposing a 5-year-old to some scenes involving killing and rape can be extremely traumatizing. He was into drugs and alcohol when he was 14 years old. He also didn't have the correct wiring in his brain. He suffered from multiple mental illnesses that were never treated. I think if he had medication and therapy, he could have went on to recover from his childhood trauma and may not have killed anyone. Patricia Gillespie is the writer and producer of the documentary about Pazuzu. She stated the following, and her statement is a good way to wrap this up. He had a very serious mental health issues that presented from a young age, and his family didn't have the money necessary to take care of those problems. And then he was ostracized in a lot of communities. He certainly had his little group and his following of fellow misfits and poor people who also felt abandoned by society, which is why they were attracted to him. I think if you had interceded with that kid when he was 13 years old, he might have become a productive member of society, or at the very least not harmed as many people. That's it for this week, and I promise I'll see you all again soon. Rest in peace to every victim of Pazuzu. Take care, and much love to you all.